Keith Urban is on stage for his first show since Nicole Kidman filed for...
For years, Keith Urban and Nicole Kidman seemed like the picture of perfection, Hollywood's golden couple. Their love story had everything: two stars at the top of their careers, public devotion, red carpet affection, and heartfelt interviews that melted fans' hearts. But behind the smiles, whispers of strain, distance, and emotional exhaustion painted a far different story. When Keith Urban finally broke his silence after their separation, what he revealed stunned everyone, not because it was scandalous, but because it was heartbreakingly honest. Their romance began like a fairy tale. In 2005, the country music superstar met the Oscar-winning actress at an event celebrating Australian achievements in Hollywood. Sparks flew instantly. Within a year, they were married in a lavish ceremony in Sydney. For a while, it seemed like the perfect union, a love that had conquered fame, distance, and personal demons. But fame is a double-edged sword, and their relationship was constantly under the spotlight. Behind closed doors, both struggled with insecurities, pressure, and the difficulty of balancing two demanding careers. Urban's long battle with addiction added another layer of pain. Kidman stood by him through rehab and recovery, insisting that love could heal anything. But over time, emotional cracks began to show. When the couple finally split, fans were devastated and curious. For months, neither said much. Then Keith Urban, known for his humility and honesty, sat down in an interview that changed everything. What he revealed wasn't the story of betrayal or blame that tabloids expected. It was a confession about love, loss, and the cost of trying to hold on when two people are slowly drifting apart. What Keith said about Nicole Kidman that day revealed not just the truth about their marriage, but the truth about himself. When Keith Urban met Nicole Kidman in 2005, it felt like destiny. Two proud Australians, both global superstars, crossing paths thousands of miles from home. Nicole had just come out of a difficult divorce from Tom Cruise, and Keith was one of country music's brightest stars, but also a man quietly fighting his own demons. Their meeting at the G'day USA Gala in Hollywood wasn't just a coincidence. It was the start of a love story that seemed almost too perfect to be real. Nicole once admitted that the attraction was instant. "I remember thinking, this man is going to be the love of my life," she said in an interview years later. Keith, usually shy about personal matters, confessed that from the moment he saw her, he was completely gone. Within months, they began dating, and by June 2006, they were married in a beautiful ceremony in Sydney, surrounded by family, close friends, and a media frenzy that followed their every move. In the beginning, their love burned bright. Nicole was patient, gentle, and ready to rebuild her life after years of emotional isolation. Keith, on the other hand, found in her a stability he had long been missing. He often said that Nicole saved him, that her love helped him believe in second chances. Together, they were unstoppable. They attended award shows hand in hand, spoke lovingly about each other in interviews, and gave fans the impression that love could conquer anything. But fame, as always, has its shadow side. Nicole's career took her around the world. Long filming schedules, months away from home, and constant public scrutiny. Keith, meanwhile, was on the road touring, recording, and living the unpredictable life of a musician. Distance became their first enemy. Weeks apart turned into months, and with each passing tour, their connection began to stretch thin. Then came Keith's relapse. Just 4 months after their wedding, he checked himself into rehab for alcohol addiction. For many couples, that would have been the end. But Nicole didn't walk away. She stood by him, visiting him in the facility, refusing to let the world label him as broken. "She's my rock," Keith said at the time. "Without her, I wouldn't be standing here." Their love story became one of redemption. For a while, it looked like they had beaten the odds. Keith got sober. They welcomed 2 beautiful daughters, Sunday Rose and Faith Margaret, and began to split their time between Nashville and Sydney. To outsiders, they had it all: fame, family, and forgiveness. But the quiet cracks never fully disappeared. Nicole's intense work ethic often clashed with Keith's need for emotional closeness. She thrived in structure and control. He thrived in spontaneity and creative chaos. They were opposites drawn together by love, yet constantly pulled apart by lifestyle. Still, both tried to keep their marriage afloat. "We don't go more than 2 weeks without seeing each other," Nicole said once. "That's our rule." It worked for a while. But over time, those 2 weeks sometimes turned into 3, then 4, and eventually, the emotional distance grew wider than the physical one. Their public appearances remained warm and affectionate. But insiders began noticing the subtle signs. Keith attending events alone, Nicole spending more time in Australia and fewer joint interviews. By the time rumors of separation began to swirl, both seemed exhausted, not angry or bitter, just tired from years of trying to make something work under the pressure of constant attention. What began as a passionate, fairy tale romance was slowly being tested by reality, fame, distance, and the weight of 2 powerful lives moving in different directions. And when the time finally came to face the truth, it wasn't a scandal that broke them. It was silence, understanding, and heartbreak. To the world, Keith Urban and Nicole Kidman seemed unshakable, a couple that had faced everything and come out stronger. But behind their red carpet smiles and loving interviews was a reality far more fragile. While fans saw a fairy tale marriage, those closest to them knew that the pressure of fame, time apart, and emotional scars from their pasts were slowly wearing them down. Keith often said that Nicole was his anchor, but even anchors can't stop a storm. His music career demanded constant travel, and his recovery from addiction required discipline and emotional support. Nicole, meanwhile, was committed to her craft, filming for months in Europe, Asia, or the U.S., immersing herself completely into her roles. What was meant to be a partnership started to feel like a long-distance arrangement. Sources close to the couple described how Nicole's need for structure sometimes clashed with Keith's free-spirited nature. She planned everything, from daily routines to family vacations, while Keith preferred to go with the flow. Their differences, which once balanced each other, began to create emotional tension. Nicole once admitted in an interview, "Keith and I are 2 very different people trying to walk the same path. It's beautiful, but it's not always easy." Those words, meant to sound hopeful, hinted at the truth. The foundation was cracking. After years of staying strong through Keith's recovery, Nicole began to feel emotionally drained. She wanted stability, something Keith struggled to give while balancing sobriety, touring, and fame. The guilt weighed heavily on him. He adored his wife and daughters, but couldn't shake the feeling that he was letting them down. "I was trying to be a good husband, a good father, and still live the life of an artist," Keith later confessed. "But you can't do it all perfectly. Something always breaks." Friends say that during those years, communication between them became strained. They were rarely in the same place for long, and when they were, the conversations often turned to practical matters: the kids, work schedules, and obligations. The laughter that once filled their home grew quieter. Keith poured his feelings into music, writing songs filled with longing and regret. Tracks like "Blue Ain't Your Color" and "Break on Me" carried emotional undertones that fans could feel, even if they didn't know the full story. Nicole, meanwhile, focused on her work, taking on emotionally intense roles like Big Little Lies and Being the Ricardos, characters that allowed her to channel her private pain into art. At award shows, they continued to appear as a united front. Their affection was genuine, but it was the kind of love that comes from deep respect, not the fiery passion that once defined them. By the time they quietly decided to part ways, it wasn't out of anger or betrayal. It was exhaustion, the kind that comes from years of trying to hold together something both people had outgrown. When the news broke, neither blamed the other. Keith avoided interviews for months, retreating to Nashville to focus on songwriting. Nicole, ever graceful, simply said, "Sometimes love isn't about forever. It's about how deeply you cared while it lasted." Those words struck a chord with fans around the world. It wasn't the story of a Hollywood scandal. It was the story of 2 people who genuinely loved each other but couldn't survive the demands of fame and emotional distance. For Keith, the silence that followed was the hardest part. It forced him to confront the truth, not about Nicole, but about himself. And when he finally spoke, his confession wasn't bitter or dramatic. It was raw, reflective, and deeply human. A glimpse into the heart of a man who had lost something truly irreplaceable. For months after the separation, Keith Urban remained silent. The tabloids ran wild with rumors, some cruel, some romanticized, but Keith didn't say a word. He retreated from the spotlight, focusing on music, family, and sobriety. Fans wondered if they'd ever hear his side of the story. And when he finally sat down for an interview, what he revealed wasn't a scandalous tell-all, but a deeply emotional confession that showed just how much the end of his marriage had changed him. The interviewer asked a simple question. "Do you still love Nicole?" Keith paused for a long time before answering. Then, with tears in his eyes, he said softly, "You don't stop loving someone just because they're no longer in your life the same way. I will always love her. That's the truth." It was a moment that silenced the room. There was no bitterness, no blame, no anger, just sorrow and acceptance. Keith explained that while fame and distance played a part, the real reason their marriage struggled was emotional disconnect. "We were both trying to hold on," he said, "but love needs time and presence. You can't replace that with phone calls and airport hugs." He admitted that during the last years of their marriage, he was often torn between two worlds, the man he wanted to be at home and the artist he needed to be on stage. "When I was performing, I felt alive. But when I came home, I felt guilty. I could see the toll it was taking on her and on me." Nicole, he said, never stopped trying. She was patient, compassionate, and endlessly supportive. "She gave me everything," he confessed. But sometimes love isn't enough. Timing, life, and our own flaws get in the way. What touched fans most was Keith's honesty about his own mistakes. He didn't hide behind excuses or self-pity. He admitted that his addiction, insecurities, and obsession with work had created emotional walls he didn't see until it was too late. "I thought I was protecting her by pretending I was fine," he said, "but all I was doing was pushing her away." Those words revealed a man who had grown, not just as an artist, but as a human being. He spoke about how losing Nicole made him confront his past, his priorities, and his purpose. "When you lose someone who truly loved you, it forces you to see yourself clearly. I realized I was chasing perfection in everything, music, image, success, except the one thing that mattered most: peace." After the interview aired, fans flooded social media with messages of support. Many praised his vulnerability, calling it one of the most honest confessions they'd ever heard from a celebrity. Even Nicole, in her graceful way, reportedly sent him a message through a mutual friend, a simple, kind acknowledgement of his words. In the months that followed, Keith channeled his emotions into songwriting once again. His new tracks were filled with melancholy and truth. Songs like Parallel Hearts and One Goodbye Too Many reflected the pain of losing a love that still lived deep inside him. For Keith Urban, speaking out wasn't about reopening old wounds. It was about closure. It was his way of honoring the love they shared while accepting that sometimes even soulmates can't walk the same path forever. "I'll always be grateful," he said at the end of the interview. "She believed in me when I didn't believe in myself." And that kind of love, you never forget that. You just carry it with you quietly for the rest of your life. After his emotional confession, Keith Urban faced the most difficult chapter of his life, learning how to live without Nicole Kidman. For nearly 2 decades, she had been the steady presence that guided him through chaos, addiction, and fame. Her departure left a void not even music could immediately fill. But instead of collapsing, Keith decided to rebuild, slowly, quietly, and with humility. He began by returning to what had always saved him before: music. Songwriting became his therapy. In the solitude of his Nashville studio, he poured his heartbreak into lyrics that spoke of regret, forgiveness, and the strange peace that comes after loss. Fans noticed the shift in tone. Gone were the upbeat love anthems. In their place were haunting, reflective tracks that felt raw and deeply personal. In one song, "Shadows fall behind," he sang. "I learned that love don't leave you cold. It leaves a light that fades slow, and even when you're gone, you're still everywhere I go." Listeners knew immediately this was Keith talking to Nicole. It wasn't a plea for reconciliation, but a goodbye drenched in gratitude. Away from the stage, Keith also focused on rebuilding himself. He committed to therapy, deepened his connection with sobriety groups, and started mentoring young musicians who struggled with addiction. "When you lose something real," he said in an interview, "you either drown or you grow. I chose to grow." His inner circle described this period as one of quiet transformation. Keith became calmer, more grounded, less obsessed with fame. He spent more time in nature, often disappearing for days to go fishing or hiking. "I needed silence," he later said. "I'd spent so long being Keith Urban, the performer, that I forgot how to just be Keith, the man." Eventually, healing brought clarity. He realized that his relationship with Nicole had never been a failure. It had been a chapter, one filled with love, lessons, and purpose. "She came into my life when I was lost," he said. "She gave me strength. And when she left, she gave me truth." Nicole, too, had moved forward gracefully, focusing on her family and career, but never speaking ill of him. In a later interview, she hinted at mutual respect, saying, "Keith is a good man with a kind heart." Sometimes life just takes people in different directions, but that doesn't erase the love. Their quiet dignity in the aftermath of separation inspired countless fans. It was rare in Hollywood to see two people end things without bitterness, just mutual understanding. Keith's career began to flourish again, not from spectacle, but sincerity. His live shows became more emotional, his connection with fans deeper. People saw a man who had been humbled, scarred, but reborn. He spoke openly about mental health, love, and recovery, becoming a voice of hope for those struggling in silence. "Pain is a strange teacher," Keith said during one of his concerts. "It breaks you, but it also shows you what really matters: love, forgiveness, and peace." By the time he released his next album, critics hailed it as his most authentic work yet. It wasn't about chart-topping hits anymore. It was about truth. The same truth that once shattered him had now set him free. In the end, Keith Urban's story wasn't just about heartbreak. It was about redemption, the quiet strength of a man who faced his demons, lost the love of his life, and still found a way to keep singing. Because for Keith, healing wasn't about forgetting Nicole Kidman. It was about honoring her by becoming the man she always believed he could be.